Is the global financial system falling apart? Are we going to have banks? Are we getting new money? So many things going on. I'm going to break down what I know so far today. Hey, Molly here. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about the chaotic world that is going on in the end of March everywhere. And it's affecting all parts of life. And I was working on a video earlier this week. So today is Wednesday. And it feels like things are happening so fast that the minute I would make a video, it would be outdated. So I kind of didn't do that. So I'm going to do this anyway. And it's going to be a little bit more big picture about what I think is going on and why I'm not really worried about anything at all, even though that is hard. And there are moments where I'm not good at that. But all right. So we are going through this incredible awakening globally around what is really going on. What is our financial system based on? Who really runs the show? And what are our choices for humanity moving forward? I know that sounds a little bit like vague and cryptic, but if you've been paying attention to Twitter at least and sort of Telegram, not mainstream sort of corporate media, there's a lot of more open discussions going on around the corruption and nefarious activities of a lot of people that we've been calling leaders. I'm going to use that word very sarcastically because I think many of the people who are in these roles of authority are anything but leaderly in their decisions, the way they treat us, and the way the crimes that they have been participating in for centuries in some cases. The root cause of a lot of this really ties back to the money system. As you know, if you watch these videos, I was very affected by The Creature from Jekyll Island, read it a couple of years ago, and no book has ever like resonated with me at like a really core level in terms of my own awakening as to what is really going on in this place we call the world. And his thesis, Edward Griffin's thesis, is really it ties back to the money system. And that if you have the power to print and control the money supply, there's pretty much nothing that is out of your bounds because you can buy anything you want. You can pay off and influence anyone that you want. You can control things like media. You can start wars. And there's no real limit to your abilities when you control the money supply. And it created this system that all of us have lived in our whole lives, kind of a debt slavery system, where even if you are considered like well off financially, we all get kind of stuck in this rat race where you take on these debts, whether they start when you're like younger and getting credit cards or getting college loans, and then you get older and you get car loans and mortgages. We're just sort of encouraged and trapped in this state of perpetual debt. And you get to this place, and I've been in this place many times in my life where I want to get out, but I've like signed up to make all these payments for stuff. And if I stop the rat race, how am I going to pay for the stuff? And kind of got into this feeling of like I needed all this stuff. I needed this big house. I needed, you needed these fancy cars. And this sort of consumerist mindset that like if I'm going to be successful means I got to buy and own all this stuff and take care of this stuff. And I did go through an awakening years ago before I moved from Atlanta up to the mountains where I had this big house in Atlanta. And it just became this like annoying thing to have to take care of. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was what I had wanted, to have this thing that is big. But I realized it was more of an obligation, a prison of sorts, than it was necessarily this amazingly awesome thing. I know. That was just part of my own realization that I don't need stuff like I thought I needed stuff. And sometimes stuff, and I'm just referring to stuff as material items, they sometimes can become more of a burden than they are a blessing necessarily. And that's not the case with all things, but I found that was the case with myself. So we're going through this great global awakening. A lot of truth is coming out. And now here's the thing about this time in history. I think we are all on our own journey here. And we're all at different places in terms of this awakening. And so if you are further along than others, remember to have some empathy that you were at that place once too. And there were certain aspects that I learned in my awakening that I remember very vividly being like, this can't be true. I don't want this to be true. Like, can I go back and unknow this because I liked not knowing this better? So the truth about some of these things is going to be very upsetting. And try to have some empathy for people who are behind you in this awakening process. Now, I've been going through this for a couple of years, and I'm beyond the point now where any of this stuff shocks me. And I'm now at the stage of impatience where I'm like, okay, let's get the show on the road. This has been dragging on for a long time. And I have to remind myself that there are a lot of people who are very new in this journey about finding out the depth of the corruption, the depth of the depravity, and the depth of the illegal, unlawful things that have been going on, that it's going to take a while for the rest of the world to wake up. So I've found that I've been in this like really impatient, like almost frustrated place for a little while where I just want to get to the next chapter. Like I'm done in this waiting period. I used this analogy the other day that right now I feel like we are about to board a plane and we're sitting in the boarding area at an airport. It's a very busy airport. It's chaotic and the flight keeps getting delayed and I'm getting annoyed. I'm not interested in reading the book that I bought. I like my playlist music. I'm like over it. There's screaming babies in there. The bar has no more wine. My patience with staying in this waiting room boarding area is at its limit. And I just keep hearing from this flight attendant, any minute now, we'll call your flight. Just hang tight. And I feel like they're just repeating this BS statement. And we're sitting here waiting. Now, I could look at this opportunity from a different lens, which is what I'm tending to do, trying to do, and say, you know what, this will happen soon enough. It will happen on its own accord. And there'll never be this moment again of sort of the calm before the storm, because a lot of very upsetting things will very likely come out and it will rock our world. And some people are not going to be able to handle getting that much truth in that short of a time period. My process of awakening was on my own schedule. I got to read and watch and consume whatever information I chose to do at that time. And I went through periods where I was like crazy in the rabbit holes, and then I would sort of step back and I'd go back in, come back out. And so I had full control over that process. A lot of people who are going to go through this in the next couple of weeks, months, aren't really going to have that kind of control. Like it's going to be forced on them. So I don't think they're going to have that luxury of like dosing it, managing the doses on their own schedule. Now, this kind of brings into this idea of worrying about stuff, which is another annoying habit that I have. And I've been enlightened recently that worrying is one, it is faith and belief in the negative outcome. And that if you're worrying about something, it means that you have now given all this attention to like the bad case scenario, where you could just simply choose the opposite and just have faith in the better outcome. Worry isn't really productive. You generally don't solve any problems with it. And worry is often paralyzing. So often beliefs are great and intentions are great when you actually do stuff. You take action. Like you have this idea, I have this goal or something, I have this thing I want to do. That is a powerful thing when it motivates you to take some kind of action. Generally, worry is unproductive. You just sit around like driving yourself crazy, fearful of worrying about some bad thing that may or may not happen. So it is faith in the negative outcome. It also can mess with your ability to be productive and mess with your ability to accomplish things and get shit done and be, someone who's out there like making their goals and intentions and dreams come true. Worrying like just gets in the way of all that stuff. So how can you sort of stop worrying? Well, one thing that I realized that like has been an issue for a long time for me is I often make things a bigger deal than they need to be. And in hindsight, things that I think are a big deal right now, in hindsight, I'm going to be like, that was really not a big deal. Why was I amplifying that thing? And I think as we go through the next couple of weeks, in the moment, a lot of these things are going to feel really big. And like if let's say the banking system collapses, which is possible, or all of a sudden we have new money, or we like literally leave this debt-based money system and now have this asset-backed money system, like all these things that could happen in the moment, they're going to probably feel like this really big deal. And that's going to create stress and that's going to create worry and anxiety. And what I'm planning to do through that is just remind myself that like, I have the choice on how big of a deal to make this. Tony Robbins very wisely has said that things only have the meaning that we assign them. So if something happens, it doesn't have any inherent meaning. Like, we interpret it. Your mind interprets, like, what does this mean? Is this a big deal or is this not a big deal? And how you choose to interpret it affects your reaction. So, like, let's say you have two people who are, driving, and like some asshole guy comes and cuts you off. You could like not care and just be like, whatever, that guy must be having a bad day. Or you can get all mad and be like furious, and now your day's ruined because this guy did this thing to you, and you are going to probably cut someone else off or react some other situation with sort of this emotion, where the guy cutting you off didn't have any inherent meaning. What the meaning was based on was your choice on how to interpret that, and you deciding what label to give that action. The same thing can happen with the collapse of the banking system. Like, it could be this exciting adventure that we are watching, or it could be this terrifying thing where life as we know it is no longer around anymore. So just be conscious of how you're going to choose to interpret what these things mean, and be aware that you could make them less important if you want to. You can make them a little bit less of a big deal than freaking out and being like, I'm panicking. And this is also something, if you are watching this, you're probably a little bit more awake than other people. They're going to be freaking out too, and they're probably going to need your help toning down the significance. Now, some of these things that we're going to learn about are really gross and horrible. And I'm not trying to minimize those things. I'm just trying to help you realize that, like, you can get through this a little bit more easily if you're detached from it and more taking on the role of the observer than the participant, which simply means as this stuff is happening and you're watching it, you can sort of act like you're watching a movie. You're not in the movie, so you don't have to be emotionally invested and emotionally like wrapped up in it, but you can still participate and talk to people and help and answer questions or whatever, without letting your like being like a participant in this crazy, weird, almost like metaverse type movie thing that we're going to be going through this awakening. And we all are going to be walking our own path through this. And so that's why it's kind of like, I sometimes have this tendency when we're in a situation like this, I expect there's other people that I know who have the answers. And I'm like, okay. And people come to me with like wanting to know what's going to happen. I'm like, I really don't know. I've asked other people and I can tell you what they told me, but I realize we're all in this situation where we're very uncertain as to what lies ahead. And it feels like a much more tumultuous, volatile time than ever before. I do believe we are on the cusp of some major things changing for humanity, which does start with the money system, because we get all new money, that everything that depends on money, which is the government and the schools and businesses, like that all changes. And we could very well wake up very soon in a world where like business doesn't really work the same way, and jobs that a lot of people have out of obligation, you no longer have to have. And all right, well, what does that mean then if all these things aren't going to be done by people because they don't need the job anymore? What does life look like? And we're going to go through this, I think, very exciting time of change where it will probably be a little awkward while we're going through it. And again, my goal through this is to just not make things a big deal. And I'm not saying that to be indifferent is as much as detached. And you can be watching something and even having a conversation about something without feeling like you are emotionally tied up in the middle of this like tornado and this whirlwind. And that, I think, is going to be the biggest assistance. Like, if you've ever been in a river or a creek, the river's better because you can swim in a river. Like, going downriver is pretty easy, right? You're just going with it. If you try to swim upriver in a very strong current, like, it's almost impossible. You have to be incredibly strong. And even if you are, you will get tired and worn out fighting the current. Someone messaged me the other day asking, like, what should we do about the BRICS nations changing how they're paying for oil? And I'm kind of like, well, I don't really think there's anything I can do about it. And if I even worry about it, like, that's not going to accomplish anything. All these changes globally, they're happening. And I'm just going to go with the flow and get on the raft and go down river. And if I see cool things to get off and check out, I'll do that. But if I don't want to, I don't have to. One of the interesting things for me about going through this journey is stopping worrying about what all these other people around me like expect me to do, and just sort of say, I'm going to get on this raft and I'm going to go and enjoy the ride and not really worry so much about what other people are doing, what they need me to do, and that kind of thing. And that, I think, will be an interesting thing as we go through, especially the change to the money system. And if you're an adult over, I think it's like 28, we're all going to go through, and definitely in the United States, I don't really know how it's going to work in other countries. We're going to go through this process of learning about the new money system and potentially resources that are sort of royalties to each of us for money that was stolen. And we're going to have to each walk that alone, like on our own. And so I think this time in history is going to be remarkable, and that we each have our own a choice on how we're going to embrace this new financial system. Like, what kind of life are you going to have on the other side? What type of things do you want to do? Are you going to set some new goals? Are you going to set big goals? Are you going to set little goals? We each have a choice on how we're going to move forward and handle this. And so the big picture things that I just wanted to let you know is, I was kind of very closely following the play-by-play news with the collapse of the banks. I did the Credit Suisse thing all weekend. And I got to Monday and I was like, no, I don't really know what the point is of me sitting here obsessively following these things in detail, because I'm still going to get to the same place, and it's kind of making me anxious, like watching this collapse happen in real time. I'm still kind of checking in on it, but I'm not obsessively watching it anymore, because it messes with my ability to stay detached and to take on this role of the observer if I'm too in it. I think the next couple of weeks are going to be very tumultuous, and maintaining your mindset, your perspective on these things, I think is going to be really important. So going through a big awakening, have some empathy for people that are further behind from you. Try to stay detached from the drama. The pendulum is one concept that is referred to in this idea. And pendulums are, that's why we're always split in half. We got to have this energetic pendulum that keeps us fighting. There's going to be a lot of pendulum activity because it's going to be high, drama, for lack of a better label. Just know that you don't have to participate. You can take on the role of the observer. You don't have to get in the fight and be, taking blows left and right. The worry might be real for some people. And my just suggestion on that is just to reduce the importance of the little things. Like, it's kind of an exciting time to be alive, but the little things that you're worrying about might not be a big deal. When like a week or two ago, I kind of had this analogy that what we're going through as humanity is a little bit like getting out of prison. And we've all lived in prison. This is a metaphor. We've all lived in this prison our whole life, and we don't know any differently. And prison is very structured. You have spaghetti on Mondays and Taco Tuesday on Wednesday, and you have fried chicken on Thursday. Whatever. You have this sort of schedule for things, and we all have jobs in prison. Like, I make pretty pictures, and I trade those pretty pictures for cigarettes, and I take those cigarettes and I go buy M&Ms with them at this prison store. And we have this sort of little economy that lives within this prison system based on sort of the rules and the prison ideas. And then a couple weeks ago, I was told, hey, you know what? You're getting out of prison. And I'm like, awesome, sweet. But I don't know what it's like not to live in prison. I've lived there my whole life, right? And I found that my immediate reaction was I started to worry about saying goodbye to prison things. Like, do I still get to have meatloaf on Wednesday? And what about my job selling pictures for cigarettes? Like, do I still get to keep my little prison job? Realizing that, a lot of this world that we're leaving is part of this prison construct, and to let go of it, it feels a little bit like Stockholm syndrome, where we're so used to it that, the devil is better than the devil that you don't. And so even though prison sucks, it's still familiar, and leaving that construct of being in this system that is not designed for our benefit to being truly free, which none of us have any idea what that really means or feels like. It's going to be pretty crazy. It's going to be exciting. And I do hope that we all can kind of approach this with a good attitude and excitement, and not let the worry and the uncertainty and the change kind of affect us all so much. So, all right. I'll report back when I have more, but just know there's going to be a ride, and try to enjoy it if you can.